Hello everyone, how are you? I hope you must be doing fine. So in today's session, we will see top Apex trigger questions which are generally asked in interviews. So let's get started. So the first question is, what is an Apex trigger? So Apex trigger is a piece of code that executes before or after a DML event occurs in Salesforce. So suppose you are inserting an account record. And you want to perform some validations or you want to update some field before the record is get inserted in the org. Then that part can be covered in is before trigger context. So you can add the validation here, or you can show the user that this field is not correct, or you can show any error message, or you can update all the fields based on your criteria. And in this is after context, if you perform some action after the record is get inserted in the org, like you want to notify some user or send some email to some users, or you want to perform a DML operation on some other object or other record, then that can be handled in is after context. Okay. So here we have the second question, that what are the types of Apex trigger? So there are two types of Apex triggers. First is before trigger and second is after trigger. So as we have already discussed that there are two types of trigger. First is before and second is after. In is before, you can handle this thing where you want to update some field, like here you can see in the code that the user is updating the contact's last name to updated name whenever a new contact is inserted in the org. And in the same manner, you can print the contact ID uh, once the contact record is inserted in the org. So this can be handled like this. So we have the next question. So what are trigger context variable? So as we have already seen, like this trigger dot new or trigger dot old map or trigger dot you can see here trigger dot size, trigger dot operation type. So these are all trigger context variable. So it generally stores the information about the records and different things while the execution of the trigger is happening. So as you can also see here that it provides runtime information about the execution context of a trigger. So these are all trigger context variable. So let's go to the next question. So how do you prevent recursion in Apex trigger? So recursion in Apex trigger can be handled by declaring a static variable in the helper class to ensure the trigger runs only once per execution. As you can see here that we have declared this variable in the trigger helper, and we have also included that variable in our code, that if the value is true, then we just return it, and it is not going to execute our trigger logic, which is to update the status field of lead here. Okay, so first time the code will execute, but after that the code will not execute. Okay, now let's go to the third question, that can we call a future method from a trigger? So the answer is yes, you can call a future method from a Apex trigger, but the condition is that you can only call the future method in after trigger context. You can't call it in the before trigger context because it do not support asynchronous operations. Okay, as you can see in the code here that we are uh, we are calling the future method in the account trigger here. As you can see that we are creating the account records and we are debugging the account name one by one. Let's move to the next question, that what is the order of execution in Apex? So the order is execution is generally the sequence of events when a record is inserted, updated, or upserted in our org. It ensures the data integrity by running validations, triggers, workflow rules, and automations before committing changes to the database. So as you can see here, whenever a record is inserted in the all, first the system validations hit, and if there are some validations which are not correct, then it throws error. Then the before trigger context runs, then custom validation rules, then Apex after trigger context runs, then assignment rules, then workflow rules, then process builder, then database commit, and then post commit logic executes. So let's go to the next question. So what is the difference between trigger.new and trigger.old? So trigger.new contains the new value of the records being inserted or updated, but trigger.old contains the previous value before an update or delete operations happens. So suppose you are updating a case record. Here you can see in the example. So trigger.old will contain all the previous values. Suppose you are updating the status field from X to Y. So trigger.old map will contain the old value, that is X, and trigger.new will contain the new value, that is Y. So let's move to the next question, that how do you handle bulk operations in Apex Trigger? So we can handle the bulk operation in Apex Trigger by using collection variables like list, set, or map, and avoid SOQL and DML inside loop to follow best practice. As you can see in the code here, that we are collecting all the trigger.new record account record in ACC list, and we are also updating the industry field to technology, and we are updating the entire ACC list here. We are not doing the thing where we are updating each record one by one. So that is not a good practice. So we generally use this logic to update the records. Okay. So next question is, how do you test an Apex trigger? So you can test a Apex trigger by creating a test class with @ is test annotation, and you can use test.start_test and test.stop_test and ensure at least 75% code coverage. Okay, so here you can see the code example here, that we are creating Apex test class here on account records. Okay, so here we are just creating a account record here with name test account, and we are checking if the record is inserted or not. So if the record is inserted, then this account ID will be there. So if the assert not equal return the true value, so that's mean that account is inserted. Okay. So the last question is that what are best practices for writing Apex trigger? So there are so many best practices which should be reminded during writing an Apex trigger, but I have pointed few here, like we should use one trigger per object, and we should move logic to an handler class. Also, we should avoid hard-coded IDs, and we should always use bulkification for our trigger logic. As you can see here, that we have this trigger on account object, but the logic part is handled in a different Apex class. So this is a good practice, and we can also use trigger frameworks and all other best practices. So that was all. Thank you all. I hope you like the video and it will help you in your interviews. So stay tuned and best of luck for your interviews.